Well, let's continue here. While tensions are rising in Europe after the Russian military advanced into Ukraine, many are wondering what Africa's next move should be. Thembisa Fakude, an Africa-Asia analyst, joins us now from Abidjan in the Ivory Coast. Dr. Fakude, good evening to you, and thank you so much for your time. So the one thing we know about Russia is that they've got strong links to some countries on the continent, South Africa not being the least of them, given the trading relationship that we have through BRICS. Perhaps if we can begin through that perspective before we stretch it to the rest of the continent.
Well, yes, Russia has got a lot of relationships, and most of those relationships, I must say, are destructive relationships. You've got mercenaries who are currently fighting in Mali that are Russian-sponsored, even though they're private organizations. They still do come from Russia. In Mozambique, we have similar situation. So we find ourselves in a position where you have a gangster in Russia outside Ukraine who has been continually threatening stability in that country. And unfortunately, our current relationship that is between our president, Cyril Ramaphosa, and Vladimir Putin is not necessarily a healthy one, because if you remember, it was President Cyril Ramaphosa who suspended that deal, or nuclear deal, which was supposed to be benefiting Russia. And President Cyril Ramaphosa has also been looking west towards his political preference. So we are in a situation where we can't really do much. But there is something that has to be done, whether we should continue finding ourselves in that group of gangsters called BRICS. You have Brazil under Bolsonaro, who is an ultra-nationalist. You've got Modi, ultra-nationalist, who continues to threaten the lives of Muslim minorities in India. You have Xi Jinping, who has gone on Hong Kong, Tibet, and Taiwan. They're also wanting to achieve and realize his ambition, expansionist ambitions, exactly as what Putin has been doing in Russia. So whether South Africa must continue being part of that coalition, and to what extent is that going to dent our brand South Africa if we continue to be in a coalition of people who do not really appreciate civil rights and human rights, and who continue to destabilize territories and nations that borders their nations?
That's been part of the response then to the South African statement issued on this, situation that is unfolding, with some feeling that the country was not as clear as it could have been about its defense of human rights when we compare it perhaps to statements that have come out of Kenya, when we look at what the UN ambassador to Kenya has said about the situation, describing it as a form of new forms of domination and oppression that have echoes of the colonial past.
Yes, indeed. I mean, we have always been on the fence when it comes to such matters. If we don't piggyback on African Union's foreign position on such serious issues, we tend to sit on the fence. There's been a number of countries that have condemned Putin, and it's only a right thing to do. Here's the man from an independent country who is listening to a certain section of the population who happen to be Russian-speaking, that they're ill-treated in their own country, and as a result, he decides that as the father of all Russians in the world, he was going to go in and invade. So the recognition of Luhansk and Luhansk in the Donbas region was as a result of that. Imagine if a king in Swati, of course notwithstanding his size and power, decides that the Baswati or the Siswati-speaking people in Nelspruit are ill-treated by South Africans and or by South African government, and as a result was going to go in and annex Nelspruit. And this is exactly what has happened. Total disregard of the integrity of borders and countries and the national borders. And this will set an extremely dangerous precedent as far as I'm concerned. In South Africa, we have people who have certain ambitions of secession. In Cape Town, for example, there's a grouping that's lobbying very hard in separating Cape Town from South Africa proper. You have people in Orania who are also hoping for the same. So it's a dangerous time for us in global politics. Besides that, of course, the energy sources are going to be disrupted, because you know that smaller countries tend to redirect their energy produce to Europe whenever such situations occur. So you are likely to have prices escalating in South Africa. This morning alone, after 7 years, for the first time, the barrel of oil, crude, has gone past $100. So we're in a very serious economic position moving forward. And we hope that reason will prevail, and President Putin of Russia will stop his attack on Ukraine.
Of course, all of this takes place during a period where Russia has been rebuilding some of its alliances, rebuilding its presence on the continent, somewhat in search not just of new economic opportunities and markets, but also of geopolitical influence. So when it comes to this matter, and how the region collectively, even under the umbrella of a body like the African Union, is likely to respond. I mean, do you see the AU getting involved in this, and particularly those members who are also members of the United Nations, condemning what is happening here?
I don't see the AU making a sort of statement, because unfortunately AU consists of 55 independent nations who have a different position and will have different position in this regard. So again, they will embrace a South African position of fence sitting, notwithstanding that the current situation in Ukraine requires a very strong position, particularly from states in Africa who are going to continue doing business with Russia. They must put pressure, because it's simply wrong. You can't have a country going into another country and destabilizing because they are dissatisfied with the preference of politics in that country, or how the country continues to deal with the Russian-speaking people. And what we've seen over the past couple of weeks has been provocation to recognize a separatist movement in an independent country. In itself, sets a wrong political precedence internationally. So there must be a strong, and we hope that there will be a strong position in some countries from Africa, but I doubt if the African Union, whose members are by and large beneficiary to Putin, and China, by the way, will utter any word that's not sanctioned by the new clients or the new political partners in Africa in the form of Russia and to a large extent China, who is seen in this regard as having an agreeable position with Russia.
While the African Union may shy away from it, the United Nations, of course, has this on the top of its agenda. There have been emergency meetings of the UN Security Council. Of course, it will also come before the broader chamber. How closely are you going to be watching how African countries are voting in those sessions in particular? And do you think there'll be a telling in terms of who may or may not be supporting Russia?
Well, we'll get to know who will and who will not be supporting Russia, because it's a transparent process. But whatever results that are going to come out of this process, Russia remains part of the permanent member of the Security Council. So they have the veto right to whatever decision that will take place. One. Two is you also have China, which might just surprise us for the first, not the first time, but among the few times that it might just veto whatever decision has been taken by the United Security Council. So China and Russia are permanent members. So there is absolutely no ways that whatever the will of the world, if demonstrated differently at the United Nations Security Council, will actually push for United Security Council to be sending troops or any form of pressure to Russia. So we'll still be in the same position. There will be that resolution which will reflect the voting pattern of the members of the UN Security Council, but that is not going to lead to Russia stopping their advances in Ukraine at the moment. So we'll still be back to square one. Let's
talk about more broadly then what the implications of this are for the continent, given the fact that we are likely to see, as a result of these sanctions, a slowdown in supply of energy, whether it's gas or oil, to different parts of the West? How are you expecting that to trickle down to the continent?
Well, it's going to impact on us very seriously because, as I've said, we rely largely on imports in the continent and in South Africa of energy, particular oil. But I think for South Africa, it's going to be even much more serious because President Cyril Ramaphosa does not enjoy a very good relationship with President Putin, having stopped that big multi-billion-dollar contract of nuclear that was sanctioned during the time of President Jacob Zuma. And we've seen President Cyril Ramaphosa also looking towards the West in his foreign policy and political preference. He's been embraced by the leaders of Europe and the leaders of the United States as well. So the situation is that we are not going to be winners out of this. Our prices are certainly going to skyrocket because of the price of oil, and also we won't have a chance to convince Putin to take a different posture in this regard, because as you know, even in Cabo Delgado in Mozambique, South Africa, together with other African Union sponsored members from SADC as well, are busy fighting various forces there, and one of those are Russian militias who are fighting in that part of the world, including in Mali. So I don't see us taking a different position.
Do you think that's part of the reason why South Africa has taken such a conservative response, if I can put it that way, to this conflict?
I think so. There's a lot to, excuse me, there's a lot to be lost if South Africa takes a very much more firm and stronger position in this regard. So they will they'll continue sitting in the fence and hope that the situation somehow solves itself, and Putin will listen to whoever he listens to, because at the moment it doesn't seem like he's listening to anyone. We have Olaf Scholz and we have Emmanuel Macron of France, who have tried very hard to convince him that is not the right action to take, but he has ignored those voices. So South Africa is not at all going to be taking a much more harsher position. One wonders, therefore, why are they sitting on the fence in this regard? And the answer is only that they are part of BRICS, and Putin is part of BRICS, and somehow they seek to protect and maintain their position within BRICS so that they can continue speaking with one voice. But as I've said, BRICS is a group of gangsters. I mean, if you look at the people that are there at the moment, from Bolsonaro to Modi of India and Xi Jinping of China, all of these people are actually oppressing their own people.
Well, we're there as well. We're there as well, Thembisa. So are we part of the gangsters too?
Well, I think BRICS has become that. I mean, think about it. Bolsonaro is another story in Brazil, as you know. His stance on liberal politics and his position on COVID-19. You have Modi, in Prime Minister Modi in India, who has been suppressing the minority Muslims in that country. Xi Jinping in Hong Kong and Tibet and in Taiwan, and now you have Vladimir Putin. I'm not quite sure what to call that, and whether we want to have brand South Africa to continue associated with those kind of individuals. So I think we have to reach some point as South Africans where we decide whether it's a prudent thing to continue associating our country with those people, or is it not time for us to actually exit that coalition, which has not necessarily really benefited us, except to a large extent our trade with China. And I argue that we can have bilaterals with these countries. We don't necessarily have to be sitting in a group or coalition for us to further our economic ambitions.
Given how hard we fought to be part of BRICS, and we've always been the small S in the bloc, right? Do you think that it's a realistic solution, that it's probable that South Africa will want to, give up that position?
I think Cyril Ramaphosa, having seen how his political thinking leaned towards, is more... and things change all the time, and there's nothing wrong with us readdressing the mistakes and position that we're taking in the past. But logic tells me, or informs me right now, that it's not necessarily a prestigious thing to be associated with these individuals in a coalition such as BRICS. I think we certainly need to reconsider. And given what Cyril Ramaphosa has been doing since the beginning of this pandemic, at least in terms of his strengthening relations with the Western countries, we might just see movements towards that direction.
Thembisa Fakude is an Africa-Asia analyst. Let me thank you so much for your insights there, Thembisa.